County. Call this meeting to order of the Sonoma County Transportation and Climate Authority's Climate Action Advisory Committee. I'm Tom Conlon, your chair, and we're going to go around and introduce ourselves.
Jake McKenzie from the 2nd District, Vice Chair.
My way. Steve Keith from Runner Park.
Emily Virgil from Healdsburg.
Christopher Peck, Windsor.
Staff, please.
Hi there, I'm PC Caps with SCTCA.
Ross Clendenin, SCTCA.
Dawn Gooch, SCTCA.
Thank you. And I'm Tom Conlon, representing the 3rd District Supervisor, just Corsi's district. I'll open the floor for any public comment. We have a pretty quiet room here by comparison to our usual standards. I don't see anyone rising for public comment. Very briefly.
Apologies. Initially, we were going to do some AB 2449 disclosures. That's not required, but do you want to see if we just need to agree to continue as a committee of the whole?
Thank you. So because we do not have a quorum today, we will be continuing as a committee of the whole if I have no objections from my colleagues.
No objection.
No objection.
Thank you. So that concludes our AB 2449 disclosure, and there is no one attending remotely either. No one
We have
on the committee.
We have 2 SCTCA staff online, but we don't have any members of the public or committee members online.
Very good. And while we are still at the very tail end of introductions, I will allow Neil to introduce himself.
Yes, hi, Neil Hancock, Kotati. Sorry, the train was 30 minutes late, so medical emergency. Do I say anything else? Is this
Nope,
status?
that's it.
No, Neil Hancock, Kotati.
Okay. And so I believe we've opened and closed public comment. And now we'll go into our administrative agenda, approval of the minutes from our meeting notes, rather, from our last July 11 meeting.
And Mr. Chair, we will move those to the next meeting as we do not have a
That's
quorum
right.
today.
Sorry for the oversight. So given that we don't have a full quorum to vote on those, they are part of your packet, and we'll move on. We'll just go right into report outs from the members by jurisdiction. And this way, Christopher, you want to start?
Christopher, Town of Windsor. I don't have anything at this time.
Neil Hancock, I guess there was Susan Harvey, who is the rep who appointed me, who also went to the SCTCA, whatever, regional meeting. She reported out on, I guess, the work that we're doing. It was a bit confusing, she said. I mean, I'm summarizing it a little bit. So, and it wasn't clear that it was an optional process that is being put together. But anyway, that was clarified. The other area that I'd like to report on is that my washer of 25 years failed, and I went through the process of getting a new washer combined dryer facility, and it was quite a process to get there. Currently, I have had a stacked system with gas, so I didn't really want to, with my wife, we didn't want to go down the route of replacing it with a gas system. But getting an electric one is way too problematic, or putting in a 220-volt line. We don't use the dryer a lot, so we went for a stacked system. But what really informs me about the process is that the physical constraints of older buildings, in this case, we've done a 1999 edition, really drives a lot of the process. So we didn't have a lot of options because the size of the doorway was actually 27 inches. And it just kept on narrowing down the options. So I think when we're looking to the future for how we enable people to move away from gas, there's going to have to be a lot more. There's going to need to be a process where people can plan it a little bit. That would be my input. You know, just that looking at what the work we've been doing and with older buildings, it's the planning beforehand that really makes a difference when you have a failure in some like a washing machine that you then want to replace it and you don't have a lot of time to really think about it. So anyway, that's my input.
Hi, Emily Virgil, Healdsburg. I just wanted to report on some of the activities that Climate Action Healdsburg has put together for the event of Sunday. Sunday being a celebration of solar and wind power. Not sure if any other jurisdictions are participating, but for Healdsburg, unfortunately, we were unable to work with the city because they require all the applications to be in the prior year to use for use of the plaza. However, this event just kind of came to fruition in the third quarter of this year, so back in July. So a bit of a catch-22, and the city wasn't willing to be flexible. So just doing a small rally on the actual Sunday of the 21st of this month. But we do have a screening of, it's a Inconvenient Truth producer, and it's a film called, I'm sorry, I'm looking it up, but it's about no idling, and it's going to be screened at 7 p.m. at where is it? At Little Saint. So happy to share more information about that. There'll also be a tour of the wastewater plant, and we just have quite a few activities planned in the area of Healdsburg coming up next week. So if anyone's interested in participating, please reach out, and curious if anyone else is participating in Sunday.
And the group that is organizing all this again?
Is Climate Action Healdsburg. It's all of the information is available at climateactionhealdsburg.org.
Thank you.
Sure. Sure, that would be great. I'll pass along the link.
Steve Keith for Roner Park. This past August 16th on a Saturday, there was a Central Roner Park community-based transportation resource fair that was well attended. I got a lot of good public engagement, voting on particular projects in the area covered by this plan. And the only other thing is just the more recent ongoing debate about a plastic, with lack of a better term, recycling plant, pyrolysis plant that's planned for Roner Park. It's been an interesting debate to listen on both sides, but that's what we have.
What's the status of that? My understanding is that the Air District has issued some findings.
So, yeah, the last report that we heard from the city manager was that it's essentially, actually, it may have been the city attorney, not this last meeting, but the meeting prior to that, where essentially it was in their hands, and the public that showed up, they were kind of directed towards, hey,
In the hands of the regional body, not the city.
correct. But just in terms of kind of an interpersonal communication observation and public engagement, that's what I found interesting, because I don't really know anything about the process. But just some of the pitfalls if an agency perhaps doesn't manage public engagement well. Certain information can be allowed to fester and get really hard to rein back in.
I think that's a fair assessment of what we're seeing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sure Jake has something to add to this.
Oh, I did make public comment at city council meeting this past week. The Air Quality Management District report on emissions has been delayed until the beginning of next month. I think October 3rd is when the public comment period closes. I think at our next meeting of this committee, it might be a good idea to agendize the question of the Synergy pyrolysis permit, and just to get an update. It may be by that time that we will have the emissions data analysis by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and we may have a decision by the city of Roanoke Park on the permit. It was indicated that they had 20 conditions that had to be met by Synergy, and I don't think there's been any update on just on whether all of these conditions have or will be met. The other thing is I do sit on the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and our staff has been working with Synergy in terms of any permits that they might be required to have in place in terms of control of any wastewater. So there will be an update on that coming as well. I reserve any other comments.
Anything else about Roanoke Park?
Hmm?
Anything else about Roanoke Park?
No, that's enough from me.
Very well. Sure. So thanks for those updates. I'll start with City of Sonoma. We are as I mentioned last time, we're engaged in our general plan update, and I guess there's a meeting upcoming on Monday night. We're going to be launching the EIR scoping process, the environmental impact report scoping process for that. My understanding is we are aiming at a CEQA streamlining, which means that we'll have to do a very comprehensive impact of assessment of our impacts. And to the extent that there's greenhouse gas emissions impacts, we'll have to do a very good job of disclosing and, if necessary, mitigating those impacts. So look forward to that. Similar process underway over in Napa. I attended the meeting. It was really just a poster board session where the public would put Post-it notes on the executive summary of the plan that the county of Napa, the climate action plan, the county of Napa is putting together. There's no consultant there to answer any technical questions that somebody like me is capable of. But I did have a very interesting conversation with the sustainability coordinator from Treasury Wine Estates, who really did seem to have a fairly good handle on the agriculture, climate related impacts. And we agreed that it's very difficult to do mitigation in agriculture. Also, carbon sequestration is a problematic area, he acknowledged as well. Let's see, then the other thing I'd just report out on is there's some wild stuff going on at the legislature this week. We did just see the State Route 37 bill streamlining and overriding environmental protections of the endangered species in that area, listed species in that area, to allow year-round continuous work on the Highway 37 near phase project. That was a somewhat controversial decision, but I think it ultimately passed the legislature with lots of uncontested support from our legislators. But I am quite impressed at how fungible our governor and our legislative leaders are these days on environmental protections, how easy it has been to sidestep and allow the so-called abundance agenda to push all those things to the side. Sound like the Republicans of my youth are now the people running the Democratic Party. However, that's a bit of a soapbox for me, so I'll just put a pin in that. And
I've got one other thing from
Please,
Cotati,
go
if
for it.
that's okay. So it was announced in Cotati that a junction going outside Cotati on Highway 116 at West Cotati Avenue that had been planned to be traffic lights has been switched to being a roundabout. And so I think that's actually a win for good pedestrian movement in that area, but it's still got to have a lot further analysis. And so it was a process that was moving into from the 35% design to 65% design. And then Caltrans was able to basically say that safety was the higher concern, and it changed to a roundabout.
great. And that reminds me of one more thing. I did notice in the SCTCA board meeting packet that SCTCA is encouraging local jurisdictions, all of the people in our areas, to send staff members to an event at PG&E next week. There's a 3-hour, I believe, workshop on how to improve your municipal building carbon footprint. And a lot of cities are having trouble with that. And so it looks like there's some resources and some techniques available from PG&E. And I reached out to my city and City of Sonoma, and they confirmed this morning that yes, in fact, they are sending a representative down to San Francisco for that. It's an in-person only meeting. So if you're looking for that information, it's in the packet for the board. And I can provide that to you if you're interested afterwards. Just let me know. Okay, so that's with a fairly small turnout. That's we moved through that agenda item quickly. And of course, I've lost my agenda. Thank you.
Number 5.
And great. So now we get to hear from BC Caps on the equitable building electrification action plan, which just was approved by the board.
I sit at the side.
Please,
Sit
yeah.
at the- Okay, great.
I have this now. Thanks.
Great. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Before I get started into the conversation or into my presentation, a couple of quick comments based upon what's been said already. Thank you for the promotion of the event that's next week. That event is actually being organized by the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, not by PG&E directly. So it'll be at the ABAG MTC headquarters on Beale Street, and that is on Wednesday morning from 9 to noon, focused on municipal building upgrades.
Great.
So, and all that information is in the board packet, and we can distribute that as well. Couple other quick comments. Neil, to your personal comment about the building upgrades. One of the things that I found recently is that there are more and more 120 volt appliances coming online that historically we've thought of 240, and now they're available as just a plug-in model. So I've just upgraded my hot water heater and my washer dryer with 120 plug-in units that needed no additional wiring. So just, I don't know if those apply or would be helpful for you, but just in general of thinking about these upgrades, more and more they're becoming kind of plug and play, where you don't need to do a whole electrical upgrade, but it's potentially just plug it into a regular circuit. So.
Yeah, so I agree. We ended up with 120 volt condensing dryer, but so that was good.
Yeah. And then the last thought before I get into the presentation, because I think it's very apropos with your conversation, I think with Councilmember Harvey coming out of our board meeting and your comments earlier related to Runert Park, just about communication and perception and engagement. And I think I wanted to call out one thing is before I go into this presentation that has come up in my work on this building electrification. And it kind of dawned on me about 3/4 of the way through my presentation to the board on Monday is how so much of our work, including this electrification plan, is based upon these huge, lofty, aspirational goals. 100% of buildings across the entire county using 100% renewable energy. Huge, lofty goals. And then we have these kind of actions that need to be taken. And I think that that we can do, I personally, and we can do kind of a better job, or where the weak spot is in drawing that narrative connection between our big lofty goals and what needs to happen on the ground. And I think, and actually in my conversation with the board on Monday, I think that became apparent to me that that's actually kind of a weakness in this current plan. And even though they adopted the plan, it is actually something that, as I present these slides here, I just wanted to call that out ahead of time for this conversation, in that I'm going to be talking about some big lofty goals and then immediately moving towards actions that need to be taken. And I think that there's a missing piece there. It's more articulated as part of the report, but not necessarily included as part of this presentation. So when it comes to messaging and presentation and the way to present things, I think that's one thing that I'm seeing even in the way that I've presented, kind of developed this presentation. So with that, I wanted to basically give a very brief update on our equitable building electrification action plan, very similar to the presentation I gave at the board on Monday. This is a report that I've been working on for the last several months, and we have just finalized it. And our board approved it on Monday afternoon. And we're moving into kind of next implementation steps moving forward. So, and I believe, so at the last meeting of this body, I believe I gave a presentation basically that talked in depth about our greenhouse gas inventory and our emissions countywide. I kind of wanted to just quickly summarize kind of the state of where things sit emissions wise with this slide, and basically looking that of our countywide emissions, approximately 23.5% come from the building sector. That's also the other high emission sector is transportation, in which has nearly 58%. So that's therefore kind of this organizational is focused on buildings and transportation. It's kind of the key chief right now. So then zeroing in on the building emissions, we have about 23% of the total inventory come from that. And about 77% of those building emissions come from the burning of natural gas, either in furnaces, hot water heaters, or stoves and cooktops. Those are the main uses of natural gas. So then that shows that one of the major intents is to shift that energy use from natural gas to electricity. To do that, we need to make upgrades to a number of buildings across the county, and you can see there on the bottom half of this slide that there's approximately 230,000 structures in Sonoma County, and approximately 90% or 210,000 of those structures are residential buildings. That includes, I believe, both single-family and multifamily buildings, and we have stats that break that down further. But this kind of gets to the scale of the issue and the fact that there are a whole lot of buildings that need some sort of upgrade in some sort. Some buildings have already had some improvements made, others have had nothing made.
Can I ask a question about that second part?
Absolutely, please.
It's 91% by number of building, but do you have it broken down by square footage or existing energy use?
I do have those broken down. It is in the fuller report. I don't have those at my fingertips, but I can certainly look those up. And
I'm
that's a great
saying that I assume that by square footage, it's different.
correct.
Closer to equal numbers. Or so.
I don't know if it's closer to equal, but that's very true.
Probably.
That there's actually that
75.
there is a higher, yes, that there's that in general, residential buildings are smaller than commercial buildings. And in general, I think that commercial buildings use more energy than the residential buildings. So then when we kind of sticking though, talking about, and I think this applies both to residential and commercial, but this is really kind of focused on residential buildings here, talking about the types of upgrades that need to be made. And again, I think this gets to where some of the, I don't want to say confusion, but where some of our messaging can be a little bit more exacting, is that all of these are the recommended upgrades. All of these are the improvements that we need and should be making. There are no mandates in this report. There's nothing in this report that kind of says these things absolutely have to happen on some sort of time frame. I'll touch a minute on the Bay Area Air District rules that are coming into play that do start to mandate some of these things. But in short, we're really kind of looking at upgrading HVAC systems, furnaces to heat pumps and water heaters to heat pumps, upgrading induction cooktops, upgrading heat pumps and spa heaters, looking at, and then also looking at the additional integration of solar PV and integrated battery storage with a lot of this. Along with a lot of that work is going to require upgraded electrical panels. But there are more and more creative ways to get away, basically by load sharing or by circuit sharing and some technological kind of switching gear to kind of use undersized or use a smaller size panel to still do some of this. Also, at the same time that a lot of these improvements are being made kind of with these end use appliances, it's a perfect time to go in and also do the more base level energy efficiency and resilience improvements, thinking about air sealing, insulation, duct repair, windows and doors, and then also the optional upgrades around wildfire hardening and seismic safety. And please go ahead.
So one of the things though with we put out like power is the ability also to cut the electricity when there's
Neil?
loaded.
Could you speak a little closer to the microphone?
So one of the things that's being discussed, and it's a general issue with the grid, is that ability to be able to cut the power or request power to be cut from certain types of things. So is it the sort of thing that would fit within the electric building systems as well? How to what parts of that can actually be offloaded when they do it?
Response dispatchable appliances?
Right. I guess that's the technical term. There's two parts to this. There's one of the dispatchable side, and the other, I know a friend actually said, hey, we got an induction cooktop at 120 volts, and it has internal batteries. So there's this option that's being more flexible in there, and it depends on the power rating, I guess, because induction cooktops is very different than electric ovens, because electric ovens are a lot more wasteful. So anyway, I'm just wondering if it's a bit more complex, I think, than just strictly the electrified building systems. Is there a way of representing that, or is it valuable to represent that?
I do think it is valuable. It gets down into some of it. It gets fairly subtle, but I think you brought up a couple of things. There's more and more individual appliances that are being built and will be built with integrated batteries. Cooktops and stoves are one example of that. And I think that that's going to become more and more common. So then an appliance can then not necessarily rely upon the grid power. If the power's down or if it needs like a power boost, it can actually just draw from that battery. Then in addition, thinking about the demand response programs that are available through Sonoma Clean Power and other providers, those are kind of, there's specified appliances that kind of can accept that call. Most commonly, there are furnaces and hot water heaters at this point, but I think it may become more. And it's basically a lot of that can be automated so that the end user doesn't even know. It basically just kind of tunes down or turns off your furnace or turns down your hot water heater for a while.
Air conditioning is.
Air conditioning is a big, yeah.
Very good. And then a lot of times those are designed that it actually does a presetting. So it's like, we're gonna intentionally overheat the water in this hot water heater now at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because we know at 4 o'clock, we're gonna go into kind of a reserve mode. So I think a lot of those, a lot of that is becoming, it's much more of a computer programmable appliances. These are all becoming very complex electronic equipment as opposed to just a plug-in unit that uses electricity.
Isn't it really, it's a connected device? Or, I mean, there's for the vehicles, there's OCPP, but there's generic name I work with is Internet of Things. So it's somehow it's that network connected or grid connected,
Right, so
grid savvy device, I guess.
Yes, I think that's very true. And I think on all of these, it ends up becoming, they log on to your local Wi-Fi network and they become appliances that then you can look up on your phone and things like that. So here, let me keep moving on and I'll get into the heart of the report. So in working through, basically through the process of the last several months, we've gathered input from our board of directors, from this body here, from our climate change members and partners group, from a jurisdictional staff advisor group, and from multiple feedback sessions focused on social equity and health advocates, and kind of began to develop a list of recommended upgrades and actions that should be taken. And as we kind of sorted through all this information, I put this together into 5 large priority areas. You can see there in the first column. First is policy support. Second is community education. Third is energy equity. Fourth is supporting the contractor workforce. And fifth is the actual building upgrades. For each of those priority areas, I then developed a strategic vision statement, which is really that's kind of my 100% long-term vision. So that's kind of the long-term goal of where we're heading. And so for each of those, I kind of developed just kind of the strategic vision to kind of indicate kind of where we're heading, kind of where we want to go, even though the actual work that needs to get done is much more kind of nuts and bolts. Okay, so this slide does not show up so well on the screen, I'm realizing, but I'll walk through the next couple slides here. So for each of the 5 priority areas that are there listed along the top row, we developed a handful of specific actions that fall out within each of the categories. And those became kind of the first, there's 20 different actions that we've defined that need to be taken. And all of these actions here are really aligned, and this is another area where I think I was not as clear with our board as I think I want to be clear here. All of the actions that are proposed in this report, these are actions for SCTCA to take and or lead and work with our jurisdictional and agency partners in partnership on. So the actions that are here are kind of their internal actions to try to move the needle forward, not necessarily mandates of, obviously we're recommending things that homeowners would do, building owners would do, but these are really actions that we're going to take. So our first area focusing in on policy support, we kind of identified 5 action areas. We also came to the realization that given existing resources, existing staff time and funding, that we kind of needed to pick our priorities and choose where we wanted to get started. So the first one we're really focusing on is action 1, and this is specifically on legislative and policy efforts. And thinking about work that we can do here at our office and in conjunction with our local jurisdictions, kind of on legislative and policy efforts. One of the key areas here that we're going to immediately focus on is the implementation of the building appliance rules that have been adopted by the Bay Area Air District. And these requirements are to install zero-emission alternatives which go into effect in 2027 for water heaters and 2029 for furnaces. And those two are going to mandate zero-emission furnaces to be applied to be used. These rules for Sonoma County apply to the Bay Area Air District portion of the county, which is basically Windsor and south. And do not apply to northern Sonoma County, which is under a slightly different air district board.
Yeah, just a quick question. Is that, in terms of the language we're using before of goals, is that for new installs or for replacements?
So this is, I believe the actual technical rule talks about the purchase of equipment. So it would apply, so restricting the purchase of emissions of equipment which produces emissions. So it would apply both to, I believe, new construction and to residential kind of upgrades. It would mean basically that if you run down to Home Depot at your local store, there'd only be the zero emission product that would be available. And how that actually works in reality is actually being figured out. There's an implementation working group that's been meeting initially at the Bay Area regional level to talk about how to implement this for water heaters. And I also wanted to mention that SCTCA and several other jurisdictions have been invited to submit applications to sit on the next implementation working group, which will be helping to figure out how this plays out for heat pump furnaces. HVAC furnaces. So we've put in an application to sit on the implementation working group and are waiting to hear back from the Bay Area Air District on whether or not we can participate in that.
Can I just ask, can I just say back to you what I think I understood, so that by 2027, you will only be able to buy a zero emission hot water heater at local retailers? Is that what this requires? And is that the whole state or just in our air quality region,
So these
county, or the Bay Area?
So these rules apply to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District only,
Okay.
which covers the majority, but not all of the 9-county San Francisco Bay Area, northern Sonoma County, northern Solano County.
They're kind
I
of,
think
they're
are
at
kind
the
of, they're
boundary, yeah.
in a different district. And I guess I want to be careful with how I phrase. I believe it will restrict the purchase of appliances. How that plays out at the individual retailer level, I think is something that this implementation working group has been trying to figure out.
It's theoretically, someone could drive to Sacramento and buy whatever. Okay, just
Yes.
checking to see I got the.
That's what they've done with the Bay Area Quality Management District with regards to coatings. I used to work for Dunn Edwards and Cotati.
Okay.
And painters would do it all the time. They go, I gotta go to Healdsburg, grab that.
Right.
And the jobs in Cotati or Winter Park or something, so.
But
Because
it's a pain in the butt to do.
it
that
covers
was correct.
purchase, not use.
Yes.
So, yeah.
What about the permitting process? Because these are bigger appliances that are often associated with a permit or sometimes associated with a permit. Is that also a potential opportunity to inform the consumer of the rule and potentially enforce the rule?
I believe so. I don't know what the actual air district rule says about permitting or how that applies at the local individual jurisdictional level. But that's a very key point.
Because, having balkanized rules and having imperfect enforcement breeds contempt of government, which is an increasing issue in our society. So interesting to see how that plays out.
So let's see. The other key thing I wanted to highlight here on this slide is paired with our work on legislative and policy efforts is also a very dramatic, a large need for additional funding sources to work on this and implement a lot of this work. So we know that funding is a limiting factor. We have a board ad hoc that is focused on climate funding. We also have there's a climate directors network that's made of, I believe, of planning directors from around the jurisdictions, which is talking about kind of funding opportunities. And then we are also going to be hosting a collaborative meeting that's being led by ourselves, by the County of Sonoma, and by the City of Petaluma, and are hosting a collaborative grant planning meeting here at our offices on October 1st. And that's being the invites for that are a lot of jurisdictional staff, basically to talk about what our priorities for the upcoming 2 to 3 years and what are potential grant or projects that could be funded with grant funds that we could, that may apply to more than just one jurisdiction, and then we could do collaborative grant applications. A lot of the impetus for getting this started has been around funding that we hope will be available through Proposition 4, the climate bond. That funding is mostly focused on natural resource protection. So we don't know, it's probably won't be the best direct fit for working on building electrification, but it will certainly be part of our larger discussion we'll have on October 1st, just around kind of funding opportunities in general. I'm going to try to move through these next slides kind of rather quickly so that we can kind of continue on with conversation. Our next major area is on community education, and our near-term action number 6 is really kind of going to be focused on creation of an outreach-focused working group that will identify priority efforts, develop integrated educational campaign materials, and coordinate community engagement efforts. So on this is kind of a longer term engagement about building partnerships I did want to mention in the very short term, we're actually looking about just doing some very quick outreach, coordinated outreach between now and the end of the year, focused on the expiring federal income tax credits that are available through the end of December of this year, and attempting to do some quick marketing on that to kind of try to encourage people who may be sitting on the fence about completing a project before the end of the year to get that done. Moving on to our third action, our third priority area, which is on community-based partnerships. This is an area where we understand or kind of know there's incredible synergies between the topics of kind of climate change, health, and social equity. We made a number of great connections during the process of developing this report that were kind of made on social equity and community health organizations. And this is a key one that I think that we'll be following up on to really kind of to solidify those relationships a little bit more and creating some sort of partnership based around kind of community health and social equity.
Question. There's a number of communities that are updating their general plans. I know that Roanoke Park's final draft general plan does include a climate change element. Have you been working in cooperation with cities like Roanoke Park? Because we'll have an opportunity to comment on that final draft of the general plan, I believe next month or the month after.
Specifically for Roanoke Park, I've done a quick review of the documents. We have not publicly submitted any sort of comments or worked directly with staff on those, but I have been kind of monitoring that process. And I think specifically, there was an earlier chapter that was specifically on it wasn't necessarily the whole climate chapter, but it was more on the social equity side. I believe that I was the last one that I reviewed. But I do think that, yes, to your point, the kind of coordinating our works and making sure that they align with the general plans is a very good point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have another comment on that, but I think I want to let you keep moving.
Sure. So then, moving on to our fourth priority action area, this is on the contractor workforce, thinking about providing, thinking about the needs of contractors, local contractor corps, both for training that they need to have, would be desirable for them to have, as well as how to make this work kind of be a benefit for and a revenue positive benefit for the local contractor workforce. This is an area that we know that there's a lot of work to be done. We also want to need to acknowledge that this is not this is not our kind of core strength area. And so we are looking at kind of how, basically at this point, we're looking to identify who would be the best key partners to lead a contractor workforce education kind of initiative throughout the county. I did have a good connection with Mayor Lands from Cloverdale at Monday's meeting. We had a good conversation afterwards, kind of about opportunities from his perspective within the contractor workforce and kind of groups like North Bay Builders, North Coast Builders Exchange, and other kind of workforce-oriented, contractor-oriented efforts. So our work here is really going to be about pulling together that partnership, being a partner in the effort, but hopefully we will not be the designated lead as this one moves forward. We wanted to acknowledge that it's needed, but then really kind of look for somebody else who can lead it. Our final section here is on building upgrades, which is the actual where the rubber meets the road, to use a driving metaphor, I guess, a car metaphor. But this is really kind of the work that needs to be done. The key thing I wanted to call out here, there are existing programs that are available from the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, from Sonoma Clean Power, from Fieldsburg Electric Utility, and from PG&E. There are existing kind of financial incentive and technical assistance programs We have been and will continue to kind of promote those and work on those, and that funding is in line and will continue to move forward. And then kind of our next action, kind of our near-term action in this area is really going to be focused on kind of the innovative program design and evaluation. And this is tied back in with the action 2 from that I talked about a few minutes ago around collaborative funding opportunities. This action 20 is really about identifying what are some of those critical, say clever, kind of innovative programs that could be kind of implemented here locally. But all of those are going to take program design, startup funding, and are, say, potentially a longer term initiative. And so before we launch into any of those, we want to make sure kind of we've evaluated those and identified that those are kind of worthwhile. Couple of examples there would be working on a building stock and energy use analysis of the county, thinking about a building benchmarking or building performance standards program, or creating additional turnkey residential installation programs. So these are all kind of ideas that we've seen done in other communities and other counties, and I think we want to give some critical thought as to how those would actually play out locally. So really to conclude here, this table here, very similar to the one that was from a few slides ago, but this really kind of focuses in on a one-sentence summary of what our kind of our focus is going to be, our initial focus is going to be on each of these, really kind of reiterating what I had gone through with the last few slides. And so I want to call out, though, the entire 60-page document is included as part of the board, or included as part of the committee's packet. So that it's in there. We will be removing kind of the draft stamp from that report and publishing on our website. But I think there's an incredible wealth of background information that's in there, as well as the information that I've kind of presented here today. And I think my take-home message is that it really does seem to be the partnership model for moving this forward is really key, both with us acting as a partner to our with the local jurisdictions and local agencies, but then also thinking about how to extend that partnership beyond our traditional local government partners. How do we work with more closely with social equity organizations, community health organizations, the local contracting workforce, groups like that. So with that, I want to say thank you for the time and certainly open to any other questions or discussion.
Jake, go ahead.
Yeah, from a practical point of view, housing is still being built in communities. Housing is still being built in Rohnert Park, down in the southern end of the city. Are natural gas lines still being built and connected with that housing in Willow Glen and in Sonoma Mountain Village, or has that come to a halt?
So I cannot speak on any specific development project because I actually don't know. Those are things that we could look up. Several jurisdictions over the past several years have adopted zero emission reach codes, or all electric reach codes, or preferred kind of a single source reach code. So some jurisdictions have had reach codes in place. The landscape for developing new reach codes based upon encouraging all electric or non-natural gas construction has gotten rather complicated with recent changes at the state legislative level. And so so reach codes to encourage and promote more all electric new construction are not something that we're really focused on for the next building code. And a lot of those decisions then end up becoming kind of back to the original developer as to what their decision is.
And I'll just feed into that a little bit because I too recently looked over the localenergycodes.com, which is the utility funded reach code support program the IOUs operate, and was confused by the most recent reports because they seem to be continuing to talk about adoption of reach codes. However, we know that the state law has just changed and is not as compatible as 25 years of serial updates of reach code or of base code every year is one of the few areas of public policy which really has been pushing the market to adopt more energy efficient and high performance technology products in the building sector. So the state has decided in its great wisdom that we can't afford that right now. And so we've abandoned reach codes as I understand it. So it is complicated right now. However, to Jake's question, I do think there was a change in public utility, I think it's Rule 20, which is how the developers are compensated for the costs of laying a gas line. And I think that has become less attractive to the developers. So when you look at the elimination of gas piping in the building and the reduction, if not elimination, of this pipeline subsidy program, essentially socializing the cost of new gas pipelines to all customers, not just the development, then you see that the cost of going all electric is cheaper for the developer. And so I think you're seeing more of a private market choice of all electric in many tracks around the state. I do not know how that's being adopted here locally because we are a somewhat upscale, especially the newer buildings. Our newer housing developments are a little more upscale. And there's a perception still in the consumer population that natural gas cooking and maybe other gas appliances like barbecues outside and so forth are advantageous, which of course is questionable when we have climate change bearing down on us and live in a WUI. But those are my thoughts on the good discussion.
Just a report from a friend in Southeast Roanoke Park. The last 2 roads that are being put in Southeast Roanoke Park haven't got gas in them. So a friend has bought a house just before that, and the developers told them that the next series of roads, which is right in the southeast corner, just a little bit off Somo area, it's the new buildings still to come up. So anyway, just an anecdotal report.
I want to follow on the point you raised in your presentation about innovative projects to help further the implementation. And this connects to something that Neil said in his report and is a long-standing comment that I have made, which is in the systems flow of replacing appliances. It often is an urgent moment, replacing a washing machine, dryer, or especially a hot water heater. The loss of a hot water in your house for more than a couple days is a significant trauma for many families. And I say that sort of sarcastically, but I won't say anything more, but I think you get the point. So I think it's great that there's now, it will be required that whatever you get down at Lowe's or Home Depot will be a non-emissions. And I think, because that will then obviously force more of that to happen. Connected to that though is one of the points that Neil raised about just like the width of the space and also the volume of the space. Having replaced our water heater, it's probably been like 4 years now or so, and installing a heat pump hot water heater, it wouldn't really fit in where the previous gas fired. It just doesn't, it's not really big enough, the closet that it was in, and there's not sufficient volume unless you open up the doors a bit, that enclose the closet space, as well as the issue of sound. People often claim that there's a very low sound, and that is not true. I don't think it's like so we relocated ours to the garage, and you can hear it in the kitchen. It's not annoying or whatever, but if you'd had that right next to your bedroom, which is what we would have had, that would have been annoying. But the bigger problem was just we could not fit it in that closet. And, it was a significant project to relocate not just the electrical to power the thing, but also all of the, I have a PEX manifold that feeds hot water throughout the house. That was not that hard because it was PEX. I mean, I taped the whole thing together and we pulled it out and drug it under the crawl space and pulled it in. But I think that's a many thousands of dollars project. So I don't know how, this is where the question is, but I think also a necessary piece of creativity on how to assist homeowners in that process, not just getting the right equipment, but where to put it and how to get it in the right spot. It's a pretty big deal. So it's not like, it's just obviously not as easy as like, oh, now I'm buying an electric vehicle and I can easily have space in my panel to put another circuit for the charging apparatus. It's it affects, the physical location, the electrical, the plumbing, a lot of things are tied up in that, as well as comfort because of sound and stuff. So I think I'm just scoping out, I think a major bump in the road, or it's like a speed bump slowing down the thing. And I don't know exactly how to solve that because it's a pretty comprehensive issue, but I just really think it's a really important thing if we're going to move it forward. Someone smarter and more creative than me could solve that, figure out how to move that forward.
So you want to respond or I have?
I'll just, really quick, I think a lot of the questions that come up a lot of times are really around end affordability and how much it's gonna cost once that planning is done. I think you have a critical point though, and I didn't highlight it, but one of the actions here that's in the report is actually focused on figuring out how to work through and provide some of those analysis tools for homeowner building by building so that we do each have our kind of roadmap. I may not do this work for 5 or 6 or 10 years, but I know what needs to be done and I know the pitfalls, and that's an easy one. And this is difficult. And so the idea of developing a building by building roadmap is, I think, kind of it's one of those ideas that I think we and partners could play a role. Here's why I have a 1-page sheet. So.
Yeah, I think that's really a good point, BC, is that if you look at the type of infrastructure we have in Sonoma County, the 92% of buildings that are residential, we have light frame construction, single family homes largely. Imagine if you're in an eastern city that's much older, has much of masonry buildings, or in Europe, which has even older buildings. They've been dealing with this physical infrastructure, hard to work with problem for a lot longer than we have out here in California, where our vintages of buildings are so new. So the other thing is that if our 24% of our carbon footprint is in the building sector, so we're going to need to fix this problem. We're going to figure this out. So BC's right. If we come up with a house by house, building by building roadmap and get people to start thinking about those design problems early. The other fix, I think, is in your report. You mentioned the emergency replacement. You can roll a water heater in on wheels, run hoses and plug it in, maybe with a circuit share because you haven't put the new circuit in yet, and get the person a shower while you work through getting the contractors out to really do
Yeah, it's cool.
those kinds of solutions. They're not built into the current business models of most of the existing contractors. They are going to try and sell what they're used to selling under the old regime, the old assumptions. Which brings me to the point about, I see a bit of a conflict between your Action 20 innovative strategies and your number 12, working with the existing contractors to do training. There's almost a kind of inherent conflict in those two things. And I've seen this cause problems in contractor program rollout. The design engineers come up with an optimized solution. They try to take it to the contracting community and train them how to do that. And they push back and say, but wait, it's more expensive. Our guys need to be retrained. We lose those guys. We need to retrain new guys. Implementation gets very difficult and you tend to have trouble working with the existing contractor population. So one of my main feedback points on the report is that I felt like Vision 4 is a little bit limited compared to, I know your sophisticated understanding is of this and the conversation we've had around the table here, we need to go beyond just having the existing contractor workforce having access to training. We need to be thinking about new contracting models. And they may not in fact be business models because it may not be cost effective or profitable. It may be a kind of thing where we need to start to have alternative program delivery models, socialized, volunteer, nonprofit, self-help, people doing sweat equity in their own house kind of models that are not right now part of the existing contractor workforce business model. And I'm not saying that those are bad. There's lots of great contractors in the community. It's just that when we look at that 24% of our carbon footprint and we look at the cost and the complexity of doing these projects, we're not going to be able to get to our goals. And that brings me to my other big question, because you at the beginning, you said there's a gap between our lofty goals and these actions being proportionate to close that gap. And I think we need to start thinking in terms of contingencies. So if we were a business and we were saying, we're going to do this campaign, we're going to, achieve these outcomes, what happens if we don't hit our goals in Q1? How are we going to adjust our plan? And right now we have extremely lofty goals and we're not making progress at a clip to achieving those goals. So if I play that scenario out, I see us having reduced number of buildings in Sonoma County as a result of unmitigated wildfire threat. And people leaving the county because they can't get insurance to insure against that threat. So those are the kinds of natural market consequences of us failing to have good contingency plans in place. And we don't talk about that a lot around this table, but increasingly, I think these are going to be market forces that just bear down on us, both market as well as natural forces. So those are my comments. And otherwise, I think this is an excellent report, BC, and you've done a lot of great work in here. And obviously the partnerships is how we're going to move it forward. So
Thank you. So
Go ahead.
some comments on that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to see the report and then, or some of this. I mean, it's very complex, but I'd make two comments or a number of comments in there. But first of all, in terms of the buildings, I think dividing it up between residential and rental, because I've got a rental, and when something goes wrong there, I feel obliged that I've got to fix it as fast as possible. So there's a higher urgency, whereas when it's within my own sort of building space, I engage really my wife, and and we can go at a much slower level, more objective. So I think looking at the buildings in terms of the residential and the rental and stuff. The other one, and I think this comes in a little bit with what Tom's saying to some degree, is while maybe there can't be, maybe you don't want to be the leader in the community side of things, is there a space for networking people together? And I just was out at the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center last night for their Chautauqua series, which they've restarted up. And the Chautauqua is a whole long-term, starts in the 1920s, of combination of education and also entertainment. They've also got quite a campus out there west of Occidental, and they've just installed a massive solar array. And it's the first place I've seen also with car chargers attached to the solar array. Seems to make a lot of sense to have the car chargers, the vehicle chargers that are actually there. But they may be, in combination with other places, able to talk about what it takes. They're very enthusiastic. They may be able to get other community leaders in a beautiful setting that can think about some of these issues and things. The other one also is the Pepperwood Institute. I think they've put in a microgrid, as also OAC was talking about So maybe that's a place also that might be something either that can network and show what they've done. They're good at showing things off. They've got they've got linkages with, I think, people who would be interested in seeing it. So it just might be that they might have some ideas of how to cultivate it in the wider community, and workshops for that process of thinking about what happens with your buildings if you want to upgrade. So.
Very well. I'm sorry, there's been a lot said. If this is appropriate at this point to speak more about messaging and engagement. Sure. Just speaking with people in my community, at the level of folks that would, would kind of be the end user of a lot of these regulations, and not contractors, not, they might be DIYers, or they might just be somebody who calls somebody to get something done. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this video series of, like, they'll take an astrophysicist and they'll explain something in space to a 5-year-old. And then they'll explain that to a middle schooler, and then they'll explain it. So, and it's interesting to see how, okay, well, they've taken this, it's still the same thing. It's a black hole, but they're explaining it in terms that a 5-year-old can get the gist of, and they move on down the line. Thinking about such a complex plan as all of this is, and there's so many moving parts. Thinking in those terms of knowing who the audience is, and being sure that, the 3 elements of communication are there: the person sending the message, the person receiving the message, and then the most important thing is that the message is understood. A lot of times you go, here's the regulation, figure it out. I think ultimately, especially when we have a goal of 100%, we want to ensure that the message is understood by everybody involved. And some of those things that the people are concerned about, there's utilities that we all rely on, or have historically relied upon, that are tangible and easy to understand. Water. Sometimes everyone here has noticed that the water pressure sometimes of the day is a lot more than other times of the day. And we kind of get that. We wonder if we're all concerned about, brownouts and electricity just stopping. But electricity is not as simple as water. There's amperage, and there's volts, and there's watts, and there's ohms, and it's like, most people don't know what all that means. I don't know what half it means. I do know that if my car battery dips in amperage, the instrument panel gets kind of funky. So does that happen to my cooktop? Does the supply of the electricity that comes to my house, does the amperage dip? Because sometimes it takes longer for my eggs to cook than other mornings. I don't know. That could be the cooktop. It's just that's something that I think when folks are going, everything's got to be electric, people want to understand what the trade-off is. There are no solutions here. There's only going to be trade-offs. And when you mentioned how appliances are going to start having batteries, the first thing that I thought of is, will batteries have a lifespan? What's the lifespan of the appliance itself? And how much of that can be recycled safely? And when you talk about zero emission furnaces, the term emission, I think, has a definition within this agency. It could change from agency to agency. But for, again, that end user who's going to be stuck with it, who, if overwhelmed and reaches that threshold, they're going to drive up to Healdsburg or they're going to go to Sacramento. And that affects your 100% goal. So I think it's important to speak in terms of what the trade-off is and why, yep, you know what, this is why gas is easier or whatever, and acknowledge that. Here's the trade-off to gas. Here's a trade-off to electricity. and we've determined that it's a better trade-off. Yeah, it's easier for us to manage. And I think that's the kind of message that we want to get off. And it's to understand too, that you have folks, they're secure in their home and their place and what their utilities are. They are going to be much more conservative about any type of change, because there's like, this is working for me right now. Why do I want to change? And to acknowledge that, and then to work on a message that would hopefully encourage them to go ahead and make that change.
We've got to leave time for Sean.
Yeah, I agree. That's actually done, but I wanted to get those things out, but yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good comments.
Yes, thank you. That was very helpful. Thanks.
So are you done with this section, BC?
Yes, yes, I'm all completely done. I just want to thank, members here today for the conversation
Why
and
don't you stay right there? Because I understand you're going to do the last item.
we'll let Shauna, I won't move. I'll let Shauna.
We'll let
Let
Shauna
you move on.
give us her report on the funding cycle 2. Hello, Shauna. Are you there?
I am finding all the buttons, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Let me get myself sorted here. Turn on my video. Sorry, I guess my video doesn't really matter. I am going to go ahead and try to move back on my, sorry, I've started a presentation that I can share with you or not. I can share my screen, or I can just go quickly through this. I know we're limited on time here, so in the interest of time, I can just run through this verbally if that's okay with you.
It's fine with, I've already seen it, of course, because through my
Indeed.
other committee, but it may be easier for the rest of the committee to see it.
Okay, well, let me go ahead and turn the slideshow back on then, and then come over here and share. And then if you could let me know if you're seeing my screen.
Change, yes, here it is.
Perfect. Okay, then I'll go ahead and get started, and I will try to keep this brief. So good afternoon, committee members. My name is Shauna Gause. I'm with the SCTCA programming group, and I've come today to give you a quick update on the second cycle of the SCTCA funding program. So the SCTCA funding program had a call for projects that was released on June 10th of this year. And we received all of those applications in August. All the cities and the transit operators in the county submitted their top priority projects. The projects that were submitted had to be included in the CTP update in order to be eligible for funding. And the funding awards are anticipated to be announced from this fall through spring of 2027, depending on the source of the funds. So to talk a little bit about the source of funds, several of you have seen this already, but we are considering a number of different funding sources. The One Bay Area Grant, also known as OBAG, Cycle 4, that's federal funding that comes through the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. We're also considering State Transportation Improvement Program funds and SB1 Local Partnership Program funds. The State Transportation Improvement Program funds were reduced significantly from the estimate that we got earlier in the summer. So when the CTC approved the final estimate for the county shares, our county share was a lot lower than we were expecting. So the program itself dropped from an approximated $100 million availability to less than that. And so we were considering adding transportation for clean air funds. That's still under consideration. It is not a decision that has been made. And if we do consider moving forward with that, it would be a decision that was made by the board at a later date. But you can see from this that because the STIP was reduced, the State Transportation Improvement Program, we are suggesting adding a small amount of TFCA instead, just to bring the total back up to about $90 million. The other sources that are being included are, of course, our measure funds, the Go Sonoma Move Traffic and Improve Safety Program and the Go Sonoma Build Bikeways and Pathways Program. And the Measure M, where those were applicable. If the project sponsor submitted projects that would be eligible for Measure M funding, then we could include that as well. And we're also considering great and tribal mitigation funds. So for cycle 2, we received 72 project applications from both the jurisdictions and the transit operators for a total of almost $800 million for that $90 million that I said is available. And the information that we have that we are presenting to you today is preliminary, as we have yet to verify and clarify all of the information that was submitted in each of the applications with the project sponsors. So as we go through the applications, we are reviewing for clarity, and we will be getting additional information from the applicants before we start the evaluation process. So to talk a little bit about the evaluation criteria that will be used for this program on the applications that were received, there are 12 categories total worth 200 points. And there are 3 categories that refer specifically to climate that I think this committee will be interested in. The first is the potential mode shift, which is a qualitative question worth 20 points. And the second is the emission reduction category, which is a quantitative category, and that is worth 30 points. And then the congestion reduction, reliability, and traffic flow, which is another qualitative category, and that is worth 10 points. So a total of 60 points, slightly more than a quarter of the total application is specific to climate. Talk a little bit about the schedule for implementation. As I mentioned, the project call for projects was released in June. The applications were due in August. We did take the first round of programming to the committees in August and then to the board just this last Monday for that STIP programming that I was talking about. As I mentioned, it was a fairly small amount, just a little bit more than $3 million. And that included state transportation improvement program and the local partnership program. And the board did approve that, so staff will be submitting that to MTC by their deadline next month. And then we expect that we will be doing evaluations, and we will bring a recommendation for the funding to the committees in about August of next year, and then we will have a draft funding program recommendations for the board in September. And we expect that MTC will also be releasing their recommendations due from SCTA to MTC in September, with final programming in February of 2027 to the board. And that brings me to the end, so I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Shauna. That's where the money comes from. Shauna's in charge of chasing the money for everybody in all our jurisdictions. But your jurisdictions have to help out too, and that's why they made these applications. So does anybody have any comments or feedback on what Shauna's just presented?
Did I read that right? That more than half of that request was smart?
That's right.
Hard to
That is
tell.
correct.
Okay, it was, sorry.
And that's you know, if you think about our sales tax, we spend half of our sales tax for transportation collected throughout Sonoma County currently on SMART. So everything else comes out of Measure M, which is actually, I guess the old Measure M had 5% allocated to SMART in addition to the same sized sales tax measure, which is the SMART sales tax measure. So historically, we've spent a tremendous amount of our local transportation funding on SMART. And that is proposed to continue with the upcoming Citizens Initiative campaign.
I would put a slight caveat on that in that Measure M had 5% for SMART. Go Sonoma does not have anything identified for SMART. And the expectation, I think, by SMART and everyone else in the SCTCA funding program is that the funding that SMART was applying for was everything other than Go Sonoma and Measure M. So they were looking to STIP and to state local partnership program and some other funding sources because they're not eligible for Go Sonoma.
Right. And the other piece of that is that the recent mascot study of the transit agencies has come up with some recommended changes in our transit, where the transit is occurring, because now that the SMART train is functional all the way down to south to the end of Marin, we don't need to spend as much of our transit funding with Golden Gate Transit. And they've agreed to make some reorganization of routes for a similar amount of money. And we expect ridership will actually significantly increase. I forget exactly the percentage ridership that's forecast to increase when those changes happen. But SMART now being a viable conduit for transit in our 2-county region makes that possible. And so it's a lot different than it used to be. And we're adjusting to that new reality.
And if I'm correct, I believe I am, that there is an initiative now on the part of supporters of SMART to have a ballot initiative qualified by signatures of the voters so that they avoid the 66.7% requirement to pass the extension of the sales tax that funds SMART's operation. And I believe that they're hopeful that they will be able to get that on the ballot through citizen signatures, which is a 50% plus one vote approval.
Very well. So if there's no further questions of Shauna, thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we'll turn on to updates on other SCTCA climate change activities.
Great. I will go ahead and take the lead on this, and I just wanted to provide a couple of updates. My colleague Anna is not able to be here today. She's in San Francisco for another meeting, but have provided a few updates for me on the BayREN programs, Bay Area Regional Energy Network programs. So a couple of updates to share there, specifically on the single-family residential program. This is known as the EASE program. Has recently been relaunched and is getting a number of over 100 homeowner appointments have been booked through September. A couple of upcoming events that are scheduled to promote this program. There is, let's see, on September 13th, that's this weekend, just tomorrow, the county's energy and sustainability team will be at the Housing and Resource Fair in Roanoke Park. At the Roanoke Park Cotati Regional Library, promoting the program. On September 23rd, there is Cool Petaluma is hosting a presentation on the program and upgrading your home. And then on September 25th, at the West County Services Center, there's a free Spanish language workshop that's specifically focused on renters, homeowners, and property owners. On how to use BayREN and the EASE home program for residential upgrades. The second update I wanted to provide from BayREN is on their business program. This is for commercial businesses, and there's a specific focus right now that's known as the BRRR program. Business Refrigerant Replacement Pilot Program. This is focused on places that have refrigeration. So it's mainly for, I believe, for like grocery stores, mini marts, places like that. This is, it's looking at increasing the, upgrading the refrigeration systems. A couple of upcoming outreach events on that. On October 4th, there's a bilingual workshop being held in Windsor. And on October 14th, there's a workshop being held in partnership with the Santa Rosa Economic Development Division. So those are going to be upcoming. Third for Bayren, and this was mentioned earlier, this upcoming Wednesday on the 17th, there is a forum being held in San Francisco on upgrading of municipal facilities. So I can provide more information for anybody who has jurisdictional staff who'd like to attend that. The last Bayren update I wanted to give actually has to do with our water upgrade saves program. And I don't know if anybody, if members of this committee are aware, but that program has been led by staff here at the County of Sonoma through the Bay Area Regional Program. There's been a decision made at the Bay Area level, at the Bayren level, to sunset that program. So that water upgrade saves program is currently kind of going through a close down initiative. It is a huge disappointment, I think, to staff here. But in the end, there were only only 2 jurisdictions throughout the whole Bay Area that had joined on. And my understanding is that there's been a huge shift in water efficiency programs that has happened the last few years, which kind of ended up complicated the recruitment process to get more water agencies signed up for that. So it's unfortunate that program has had a good run, but I think it's kind of in the process of kind of shutting down, with potentially a outdoor water efficiency program being considered for the future. There was a proposal to possibly could we take this indoor program and pivot it to be an outdoor water efficiency program, and the decision was made that it's really no, those are 2 separate efforts. The residential program is kind of is shutting down, and then any future efforts will be separate. Last update I wanted to provide, just kind of make sure I get this. Yes, last update I want to provide, and I'll be presenting on this in the future. As everyone may be aware, our organization produces a countywide greenhouse gas inventory every 2 years, 2 to 3 years. We've been currently that is all done with in-house Excel files and calculations. And we're in the process right now of becoming a member of ICLEI, who offers their ClearPath 2.0 software in collaboration with a group known as Climate View. We've just become ICLEI members, just gotten access to the ClearPath 2.0 software as of this morning. And I am slowly going through the tutorials to evaluate if and how we would take our existing inventory and move it into this new software. There's a whole wealth of benefits that would come with this, including a much more integrated look at what are the actions that are listed in climate action plans, what are the impacts those have on the ground, and then how do those manifest and show up as part of the longer term inventory. There's a lot of reasons why we want to go to this, but we're kind of in the evaluation period phase now, before we make any firm decisions on whether the work needed for that. But I think that's something I wanted to mention, because I think that could actually be quite a long-term benefit to kind of stitch together this issue I pointed out at the beginning of lofty goals to emissions reductions, and how do we really have a dedicated, a very easy to understand and articulated kind of logic chain. We have a program that does this, it has these impacts on the ground, and it shows up in the emissions. So
That's right.
wanted to highlight that we're investigating that at this point. So
Great. And BC, David Leland, who's our Sonoma representative, has experience with that ClearPath tool from our Sonoma municipal inventory that we did several years ago. And I flagged this to him earlier this week. He's out of town. He wouldn't make it come today, but he's another resource for using that tool, because he also did the Sea Ranch inventory for them as well.
Right. And the only thing I'll mention there is, even though they're calling it ClearPath 2.0, it is not an upgrade from ClearPath 1.0. it is a completely different set of software they've moved in and are branding it as 2.0. And a lot of times in the software world, we think of it about it being an evolution. This is a gut and amend situation.
Gut and amend. Well,
So-
thank you for that.
So, yeah, again, I will still follow up with David because I think his experience, would be
Yeah.
very helpful.
Interesting. We're running a little over, so just quickly move into announcements, unless there's any questions on BC's presentation. Thank you. Anybody have announcements?
We got a book sale at the Cotati Runner Park Friends of the Library coming up in October. I thought I'd throw that one in before, because the next meeting's not till November, but yeah, that's October 9th, 10th, and 11th. 8th, Wednesday in the evening on the 8th is for members, but you can show up and pay your $5 and become a member. There's probably going to be upwards of about 6,000 books there, of a lot of books. I move the books, so I know exactly. There's a lot of books. So
The Friends of the Library of Runner Park, so I know that Steve does all this work.
yeah, but definitely want to plug that, because it breaks my heart when the books that don't get sold. I know where that's going, and I'd sure like them to go into another home rather than the landfill.
I'll plug books as excellent insulation.
Yeah, there you go.
Done that in my house, most of my walls.
I just pile them up around me.
Yeah.
Official word from Sonoma Mountain Village via Brad Baker. All new buildings at Sonoma Mountain Village are all electric.
Good. And then any other announcements? Because I have just two quick ones. Came across some recent publications. Carbon Tracker has just issued the awaiting takeoff report, which is a look at the aviation sector's how close they are to their Paris commitments. And the reality is we're falling way behind in aviation. And given that Sonoma County just announced that Southwest Air is going to be traveling through our airport, and that we are far over the number of takeoffs and landings that were previously approved under our environmental impact report for that airport. And it's not part of BC's historic inventory for the county. And the fact that we are largely a tourism dependent economy here. We are, I believe, and one of the things in the report says, as a policymaker recommendation, airport readiness for battery electric and or hydrogen aircraft is something that policymakers should be looking at. And that investors in, if you're going to buy a bunch of airplanes or invest in airport infrastructure, need to evaluate the transition risk exposure and model transition scenarios that reflect accelerating policy, technology, or demand side shifts. And I'm especially worried that, we have our economy is dependent on people flying in from other parts of the world to experience the Sonoma tourism experience. And if suddenly that were taxed, it would be a big hit to our local recreation economy. So that's the one. And then the other is that Nature Communications just published a fire risk to structures in California's wildland urban interface. And it's a study that used data from, I think, 3 of the 5 fires were Sonoma County fires. And they've stacked the types of building improvements that you can make to make your building more resilient. And we've spent a lot of money to date on vegetation management. But the reality is that the #1 risk factor appears to be separation of buildings from one another. That is what drives urban conflagrations, is how close you are if the building next to you burns. Second is exterior siding. Third is year built. Fourth is flame length. Fifth is ember deposited. Roof construction, vent screening. And then at the very bottom, window panes and eaves. So it's a little bit of an inversion of some of the previous thinking, but this is based on the latest research, and I just haven't even read the paper myself, just kind of scanned it. So people want to take a look at those and stay abreast of that, because I think the legislature is getting a somewhat more sophisticated appreciation for these matters. Not that the budget shows it yet. And with that, if there's no further comments, we'll go ahead and terminate our meeting. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.